Mutation Genesis from the Fempiror Chronicles by George Willson. Chapter 18. Out of the Tomb. Silence. It had been silent for more than an hour. The silence served to compound the effect of the dead air Tiberius had been breathing all day. He had listened carefully to the sounds outside the crypts as troops had passed by them multiple times through the course of the day, causing the occasional light to stream in through the cracks in the coffin. He had long since lost track of time waiting for the Tepish to give up their search. His hope was that if the Rostem laid low long enough, the Tepish might believe they had found another way out and leave. It had been silent long enough. He had to risk getting out. He slowly opened the lid of his temporary tomb and found the junction area to be completely dark. Even the stale air of the tunnel was a relief to the air of death inside the coffin. He crawled out of the coffin completely and listened intently through the darkness. No lights shone anywhere, nor were there any sounds in the catacombs. He took in another breath and noticed a pungent smell filled the cavern. The smell had not been present when they arrived here hours ago. He pulled the handle down on the torch. It roared to life and illuminated the small area containing the 8 coffins, 5 of which held the rest of his warriors. Running down the sides of the area and stretching down the halls were 2 long lengths of rope. He noticed the ropes were occasionally knotted to make the links continuous. They stretched as far as he could see out of 2 of the 4 exits from the room. He knelt down and touched the ropes, which shimmered from some kind of substance that they were soaked in. It was black, thick, and slick to the touch. He sniffed his fingers and confirmed these ropes as the source of the hideous smell. The scent was so unfamiliar, he was not only unable to identify it, but he doubted he had smelled anything like it before. "Rostem, we're clear," Tiberius called out quietly. The other 5 immediately exited their crypts. One by one they stood in the center of the room, taking in what air there was despite the smell. "And I thought the air was stale out here," Kaltesh commented, taking in deeper breaths than the rest of them. Falta had already knelt down to the ropes. "What are these?" she asked. "Not sure," Tiberius admitted. "They are damp with a foul-smelling substance. I don't like it." "What do you think?" Yori asked Tiberius, coming right to the point. "Further in, or back the way we came?" "I doubt the Tepish would let us go so easily," Boltosh commented. "I agree," Tiberius nodded, "but we may not find another way out. We can't remain down here forever." "So we take our chances either way," Tyrion said. "Our other problem concerns whether the Tepish actually left, or are down here waiting for us to show ourselves," Tiberius said. "I know that if I were them, I would be waiting." "If we stay together," Kaltesh said, "we should be able to defend ourselves. We have the advantage of surprise." "And if I remember correctly," Tiberius said, "there is another way in near the cemetery. We just need to find it." "What if they are watching that exit?" Tyrion asked. "Do you want to stay down here?" Tiberius tossed back. Tyrion shook his head. Yori spoke from one of the doorways where the Tepish had placed the ropes. "Tiberius, they may have given us our way out," she said. "Oh?" Tiberius said. "These ropes have to go somewhere," she explained. "I know I would go this way, which is where they're going. I doubt they would just string them randomly through the caves." "I would have put them on our path," Kaltesh said. "You know they'll be waiting when we come out," Yori said. "I'll take a good fight over this," Tyrion said. "Then let's get out of here," Tiberius said. He handed the torch to Yori, who set off immediately down the tunnel. Tiberius followed her closely, with the other 4 tight behind him. They moved quickly but cautiously down the tunnels, which snaked toward an unknown end. Yori only paused a couple of times to get her bearings, but confirmed that she would just keep following the ropes. A low rumble sounded behind them. "Do you hear something?" Boltosh asked everyone from the rear of the formation. The sound was getting louder, but then Tiberius smelled it. Smoke. He was unable to hold back the fear in his expression as the purpose of the ropes occurred to him. "They're smoking us out," he declared. "Run." Without any other choice, they charged single file down the halls as the catacombs grew orange behind them. Whatever was on those ropes, it was allowing them to burn quickly. It took only seconds for the flames to catch up to them, and then pass them by entirely. The heat was intense, but they had to keep moving or they would die. Their cold body temperature served to make the heat even worse. Smoke filled the tunnels, and it became more and more difficult to see despite their glowing path. The old wooden supports began to burn, and Tiberius wondered if they would reach the end of the tunnel before it all came down on their heads. Suddenly, the ropes ended. They found themselves against a door. As one, they pushed the door wide open, disregarding any caution over what might await them. The 6 rostim poured out of the tunnel, smoke billowing out behind them. They coughed in the closed air of the building they had entered. After a moment of coughing, Tiberius looked around. As he suspected, the other exit from the catacombs was in the cemetery. He suspected that in order to match the entrance and exit, the Tepish simply entered from the cemetery and met up in the middle. But rather than the exit emptying into the open air, they had emerged in a mausoleum. People who could afford to remain above ground had themselves interred in stone coffins set into the stone walls. The trademark arum gray stone was all around them, but the stone quickly turned to black as the smoke filled the closed space and gathered against the ceiling. "We've got to get some fresh air," Tyrion declared, moving for the exit. "Wait," Tiberius called out, still gasping for breath. He knew they had to get out of this room as soon as possible, but they had a moment to assess their situation before running headlong into it. He ran to the double doors that led outside and listened carefully. He heard a series of voices muffled by the thick walls of the mausoleum. He could hear that one voice stood out over the rest, giving orders, but through the walls it was impossible to hear what that voice was saying. What he could determine, however, was that they were waiting. Though exhausted, they had one more fight ahead of them. Tiberius stepped back from the doors and drew his sword. "Get ready," he said. As one, the 6 rostim who had survived the sun, the mutations, and the fire drew their swords and readied themselves for one more fight. Tiberius stepped forward and took the handle of one of the doors. He looked at Tyrion and directed his eyes to the other door. Tyrion ran to the other door and held its handle. Tiberius counted off. 1, 2, 3. He and Tyrion flung the doors open, and all 6 charged into the cemetery outside. The cool air hit him full on in the face, and it was beyond refreshing. He felt his strength come back to him. He prepared to strike until he saw the owners of the muffled voices. Ulrich stared at them with an uncharacteristically surprised expression as a small band of Alewo piled a dozen Tepish carcasses beside gravestones. Tiberius lowered his sword as Ulrich calmly cast his gaze over the 6 remaining rostim. "Well," he said in that low, calm voice Tiberius knew so well, "that explains the Tepish buildup in the cemetery.